Beneath the emerald veil of the Amazon rainforest, where vines tangle like the curls of time, and the air carries the hush of a million leaves, something ancient slumbers. It is not just the chirping of cicadas, or the whisper of wind through the canopy, that gives the forest its voice. It is the feeling, subtle and persistent, that something is hidden here, not just animals, not just rivers, but memory, memory wrapped in green. For centuries, the Amazon was seen as a place of silence and survival, an untamed wilderness, vast and unknowable. Maps left it blank. Explorers feared it. Scholars dismissed it. What could possibly exist here, where the soil is poor and the roots run deep and wild? But now, the silence is starting to speak, softly, gently, like a whisper rising from beneath the moss. Something is shifting in our understanding, not in a blaze of discovery, but in the quiet unfolding of evidence, long overlooked. Not temples wrapped in gold, but causeways buried beneath trees, not monuments of stone, but geometric patterns written in the soil, and not ruins shouting for attention, but cities, entire cities, breathing beneath the forest floor. The Amazon has always hidden its secrets well. Unlike deserts that preserve ruins in dust, the rainforest reclaims. In months, it swallows. In years, it erases. Time here does not just pass, it grows. Trees take root in forgotten courtyards. Vines embrace broken walls. The jungle heals its own history, until only the land remembers what stood there. But what if we listened more carefully? What if, beneath the roots and rivers, there were echoes of civilizations we never knew existed, not primitive camps or scattered tribes, but organized, thriving cities? Cities with roads, plazas, ritual centers, astronomy, architecture, culture. For centuries, such ideas were dismissed, regarded as fantasy or exaggeration. The jungle, we were told, was too harsh for civilization, too wet, too poor, too wild. But history, it turns out, is often rewritten, not by loud discoveries, but by quiet persistence. And so we begin this journey, not with a loud proclamation, but a question: what lies beneath the trees? Tonight we won't race through history. There will be no battles, no kings, no empires etched in stone. This is not that kind of story. This is a story told slowly, in shadows, in soil, in the looping patterns of memory left by forgotten hands. It is a story that stretches not just across centuries, but across assumptions. It asks us to reconsider, not just what we know, but how we've come to know it. It asks us to imagine, not a jungle untouched by man, but a jungle hiding man's oldest dreams. What if the Amazon is not an untouched wilderness, but a buried memory? What if the trees are growing where temples once stood? What if we've been looking at the forest, and not seeing the city? In the chapters ahead, we will walk softly through those possibilities. We will follow the soft hum of ladder scans, the slow brush of archaeologists' hands against earth, the echo of myths passed down in forgotten dialects. We'll listen to the jungle, not as a place of emptiness, but as a keeper of memory, because beneath every root system and hummingbird's path, beneath the frogs and flowers and serpents curled around ancient stones, there may be streets. Not streets like ours, but streets of earth and ritual, of alignment and silence, of people who lived, built, and vanished, not into oblivion, but into overgrowth. So rest your mind, let the vines wrap gently around your thoughts, let the soil settle, let the wind pass slowly through the trees. The Amazon is waiting, and it has a story to tell. Step into the forest, and the first thing you feel is the weight of life. Every inch breathes. Every surface pulses with moisture. 1,000 shades of green stretch in every direction, from the moss that clings to low branches to the soaring towers of kapok trees that pierce the canopy. Beneath your feet, the earth is soft and shifting, alive with insects and roots that twine like threads through a vast tapestry of living memory. This is not a quiet place, though it has long been called one. The Amazon is a world in constant motion, vines climbing, fungi blooming, rain falling, creatures darting through the underbrush in the soft hush of early morning mist. But while its surface teems with life, its secrets lie buried. Just a few inches below this lush exterior, history sleeps beneath layers of organic camouflage. In this rainforest, time behaves differently. Elsewhere, ruins linger for centuries, exposed to sky and sun, stones remain visible, structures resist erosion, but here, in this ever-breathing world, nature reclaims everything with astonishing speed. What a civilization builds in decades, the forest can overtake in years. A village abandoned today might disappear completely beneath vegetation in a generation. Within a century, even large towns can vanish from human view, their roads hidden under root systems, their plazas drowned in leaf mold and creeping vine. This is the green veil of time, not a blanket, but a growing skin. It does not merely cover the past, it transforms it. What was once a temple becomes a mossy mound. What was once a road becomes a root-strewn path. What was once a wall becomes the spine of a tree trunk. And because we look for stone and permanence, we have long missed what is woven into soil and fiber. For centuries, explorers and colonists described the Amazon as a place hostile to civilization. European naturalists, in the 19th century, believed that the jungle's thin, acidic soil could never support large-scale agriculture or cities. The rainforest, they said, was too wild, too infertile, too chaotic. Indigenous people were labeled as isolated hunter-gatherers, survivors, not builders, and so the myth grew: the jungle was virgin, untouched, unchanged. But the forest itself disagrees. Every so often, signs emerge: a perfectly straight line of trees in the middle of nowhere, a circular rise in the soil, too symmetrical to be natural, clusters of pottery shards found miles from the nearest known settlement, charcoal buried deep in the earth, and strange dark patches of soil, richer, deeper, more fertile than the land around them. At first these signs were dismissed, coincidence, natural anomalies, but over time, a new question emerged. What if the Amazon was not untouched wilderness? What if it was abandoned civilization? Today, we know that the rainforest holds far more than we once believed, but these revelations didn't arrive with fanfare or gold artifacts. They came with patience, with aerial scans, with gentle digging, and most of all, they came with a willingness to listen to stories long ignored. For many indigenous communities, the idea of cities beneath the forest is not a revelation, it's a memory. Passed down in story and song are the tales of ancestors who built stone houses, who walked roads that stretched for days, who honored gods in great circular plazas. These are not the myths of distant lands, they are the inheritance of the forest itself. But until recently, science didn't listen. We assumed that if a city left no massive stone pyramid, no towering monument, it could not have existed. But that assumption speaks more to our expectations than to reality. The civilizations of the Amazon worked with different tools, different materials, and a different sense of permanence. They built not to dominate the land, but to live within it, gently, flexibly, adaptively. Their cities were not monuments but systems: roads, waterways, crop fields, temples, and homes, woven into the forest rather than carved from it. And when the people left, through disease, migration, or collapse, the forest took it all back, not with destruction, but with embrace. It is no accident that so many signs of ancient life remain just beneath the surface: a raised causeway here, a ringed mound there, dark earth hiding secrets. The forest doesn't just bury history. In its own way, it preserves it. But to see it, we must change how we look. Instead of searching for towering walls, we must study soil patterns. Instead of hunting for statues, we must trace canals. Instead of assuming wilderness, we must consider memory. The green veil of time has hidden much, but not forever. Now, with new tools and open minds, we are learning how to peel back that veil gently, without tearing it. And as we do, we begin to glimpse something extraordinary, that the Amazon was not just a wild place on the edge of civilization. It was civilization, not in spite of the forest, but because of it. And that realization changes everything. As we move forward, we will begin to see how the forest's camouflage is being unraveled by light, light that pierces the canopy from above, revealing patterns invisible to the human eye, a technological whisper, a gentle brushstroke on the canvas of the unknown. Because the forest has never been silent, we simply forgot how to listen. For centuries, the canopy of the Amazon was both a ceiling and a curtain. From above, all one could see was green, endless, undulating green. A living ocean of trees, vines, and mist that stretched beyond the horizon. Beneath it, history was hidden. Entire civilizations may have lived and vanished below this roof of leaves, and we would never have known. The jungle keeps its secrets well. It does not reveal them easily, not to the naked eye, not to the impatient. But now we have begun to see differently. Not with shovels or machetes, not with intrusive machinery or roaring bulldozers, but with light, soft, invisible light. From high above the forest, aboard small planes and drones, pulses of light are sent downward in rapid-fire bursts, scanning the surface of the earth, even beneath its skin of trees. This is LiDAR, light detection and ranging, and it has changed everything. In essence, LiDAR is a way to listen to the land with photons. A pulse of laser light is fired toward the ground and reflects back. Millions of such pulses are collected and mapped. The trees bounce some light back, the leaves and branches interfere, but some beams slip between them and touch the forest floor, and it is what they find there that has stunned the world. From the sky, through the green veil, the earth begins to whisper. Lines emerge, perfectly straight, running for miles. Circular clearings, carefully spaced, raised mounds, arranged in symmetric grids. The ghostly outlines of roads, canals, and causeways emerge from beneath the overgrowth, like breath on glass. What seemed like wilderness becomes a blueprint. In Bolivia, near the Llanos de Mojos, entire networks of settlements have been revealed. Not just individual ruins, but systems. Roads connect plazas, ditches form moats, water channels show hydraulic engineering. Some of the geometries are immense, intricate formations that resemble mandalas or celestial maps. These are not random, they are planned, designed. Elsewhere, near Brazil's Xingu River, LiDAR exposed long straight roads lined with low earthen walls, connecting settlements across vast distances. At ground level, none of this is visible. Walk through the jungle and you'll see only trees, tangled roots, thick brush. But from above, from the right height, with the right light, the past becomes visible again. This is the quiet magic of LiDAR. It doesn't destroy, it doesn't intrude, it simply reveals, and what it's revealing is extraordinary. The Amazon was once a land of engineers, of urban planners, of astronomers and architects who aligned roads to solstices and stars. Their cities did not look like Rome. They did not build in marble, but their vision was equally grand, etched into forest and river, rather than carved in stone. To the modern eye, raised earth mounds and ring ditches may seem simple, but when multiplied by thousands, over miles and miles, their purpose becomes clear. This was not survival, this was civilization, and still we have barely begun. Only a fraction of the Amazon has been surveyed by LiDAR. The jungle is vast. Some areas are inaccessible. Political borders, funding and logistical challenges prevent full coverage. But every year more scans are completed, and every year the map changes. What was once empty is now full of lines. What was once silence is now signal. There's a poetic symmetry in it all, using beams of light to illuminate a place long associated with darkness and unknowability. But this light is not blinding, it is gentle. It does not strip the forest away, it allows the jungle to remain itself, even as it yields its memory. To see a 3D LiDAR map is to glimpse a ghost world. The trees are stripped away digitally, leaving behind a terrain that few humans have ever seen, a land as it might have looked 1,000 years ago, a world of intention, of human presence, of design. And yet it does not feel like intrusion, it feels like a rediscovery, because these were not lost cities in the dramatic sense, they were simply forgotten, buried by time, reclaimed by vines, and dismissed by assumption. But the earth never forgets. It holds its memory, in elevation, in curvature, in subtle rises and depressions in the land. LiDAR simply helps us read those patterns again. The technology is neutral, but what it shows changes us. It forces us to question, who were these people? What did they build? What did they know about the stars, the rivers, the soil? Why did they leave, or vanish? And what legacy remains buried beneath the jungle's sigh? In the past we had to wait for the jungle to give something up, a pottery shard, a mound visible in drought, a trail of myths. Now we ask the forest with light, and the forest answers, gently, clearly, patiently. It always knew we would come back looking. As we move onward, we follow one of these discoveries more closely, a network of ancient settlements that might once have housed tens of thousands of people, roads laid in straight lines, ceremonial centers aligned with stars, defensive walls, canals, gardens, and homes, all hidden in a place once believed to be too wild for culture. We journey next to the heart of a forgotten urban landscape, to the lost city of Cuhicugu. In the northern reaches of Brazil, near the headwaters of the Xing River, lies a place both forgotten and sacred, a region where the forest grows thickest, where rivers braid through the land like veins through muscle, and where modern eyes once saw only wilderness. But the canopy was lying, because hidden under that living ceiling was a network of cities, roads, causeways, canals, and settlements, all arranged with purpose and precision. This is Cuhicu, a name unfamiliar to most, yet a place that may represent one of the most astonishing archaeological rediscoveries of the modern age. Cuhicu is not a single ruin. It is a system, a constellation of interconnected sites spread across more than 7,700 square miles of jungle. What has been uncovered through LiDAR scans, satellite imagery, and careful ground study is nothing less than an ancient urban landscape, one that could have supported a population of at least 50,000 people, and possibly more. This is the Amazonian Atlantis. Not because it sank beneath the sea, but because it sank into memory. Let us pause and imagine it softly. The year is somewhere around 1200 AD. The sun rises through mist, casting dappled golden light across the tops of massive ceiba trees. In a large clearing shaped like a perfect circle, families gather near wooden homes built on earthen mounds, children laugh near the water's edge. Elders chant in low rhythmic tones by the ceremonial plaza. Overhead, birds scream their colors into the sky. And stretching out from the heart of the village, straight earthen roads lead to other communities, straight as arrows, cutting through what is now one of the densest forests in the world. These roads weren't just for walking, they were engineered, flanked by ditches designed to resist flooding, some stretched for kilometers. At Cuhicu, they link not only houses but sacred spaces, temples, ritual mounds, and defensive moats. These were not scattered tribes. This was civilization. The society that built Cuhicu developed complex systems of agriculture and land management. They created terra preta, dark, fertile soil, to enrich their crops and feed growing populations. They dug canals and reservoirs to regulate water. They practiced controlled burning to manage forests and clear land for farming. And most remarkably, they did all this without wheels, without metal tools, and without writing. Yet nothing about their design feels primitive. The settlements were laid out with symmetry, geometry, alignment. Many of the circular plazas and roadways corresponded to solar movements, hinting at cosmological beliefs woven into urban planning. Like the ancient Egyptians aligning pyramids to the stars, the people of Kuhiku looked skyward, not to escape the earth, but to understand how to live upon it, and they succeeded. For centuries. So why didn't we know? Because when European explorers arrived, the civilization was already gone, and what little remained was soon swept away, not by time, but by disease. The arrival of colonizers brought with it smallpox, influenza, and violence. The Amazon, unprepared, was devastated. Entire communities vanished in a matter of years. Their cities, once thriving, emptied. Their roads grew over, the forest began its patient work, and in time, Kuhiku disappeared. Not in ruins, but in regrowth. Only the Kuhiku people, descendants of those early builders, carried the memory forward, through story, through ceremony, through songs that spoke of ancient cities and sacred roads. Western scholars dismissed these tales for centuries, believing them to be myth, until the scans proved otherwise. The geography matched the legends, the shapes matched the stories, and suddenly, the myths had roots in the earth. To walk the land around Kuhiku today is to walk on whispers. The ground seems unremarkable at first, soft, mossy, dappled with shade. But then you notice the curve in the earth, a raised ridge forming a perfect circle, a trench running arrow straight into the trees, a pattern that no tree could form on its own. The forest is not random here. It follows a memory. The story of Kuhiku upends the long-held myth that the Amazon was always empty, a place where no great civilization could take root. In truth, it was not emptiness, but abandonment, followed by forgetting. And that forgetting wasn't accidental. It was encouraged. For centuries, colonial narratives painted indigenous peoples as rootless, cultureless, pre-civilized. To admit that the Amazon once held cities would mean rewriting the core of that narrative, and so, the memory of Kuhiku slept, until it could no longer stay hidden. Now, slowly, piece by piece, the picture returns, but Kuhiku is not just a physical place, it is a symbol of how much we've overlooked, of how many assumptions we've accepted, and of how much still lies just beneath the surface. It reminds us that cities do not need to be made of stone to be real, that civilizations can bloom in harmony with nature, and leave no scars behind, that complexity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply breathes, and sometimes it vanishes, not because it failed, but because the forest closed its arms around it, not to destroy, but to protect. In the next section, we'll explore one of the keys to understanding how cities like Kuhiku could flourish in such seemingly inhospitable soil, not gold, not water, but black earth, rich, mysterious, engineered. We now follow the roots into the ground, into the enigma of terra preta. In the stillness of the forest floor, beneath fallen leaves and tangled roots, lies something almost alchemical. A type of soil darker than its surroundings, softer, richer, alive in a way the rest of the ground is not. This is terra preta, dark earth. It is not natural, it was made, and it may be the single most important clue to understanding how cities once thrived in the very heart of the Amazon. Most of the Amazon's native soil is surprisingly poor, washed by rain, and leached by time. It is acidic, low in nutrients, and not well suited for intensive agriculture. For decades, this fact was used to argue that the rainforest could never have supported large populations. The jungle, we were told, could not feed cities. But terra preta changes everything. This mysterious soil is not found everywhere. It appears in patches, dark islands, in a sea of lighter earth. These patches are often located near known archaeological sites, where people once lived, worked, farmed, and buried their dead, where culture bloomed beneath the trees. Terra preta is rich in charcoal, bone ash, manure, and organic refuse, a kind of ancient compost created slowly, deliberately, and with intention. Modern soil scientists still debate exactly how it was made. Some believe it was produced by slow-burning organic matter in a low-oxygen environment, a technique called pyrolysis. Others suggest it may have formed over generations of careful layering and reuse. What all agree on is this: it was engineered. This was not the byproduct of chaos. It was design, sustained, purposeful, and brilliant. The charcoal in Terra Preta, often referred to as biochar today, acts like a sponge. It holds water, it retains nutrients, it encourages microbial life, and it doesn't break down. While modern fertilizers last for a few seasons, the dark earth created by ancient Amazonians has remained fertile for centuries, perhaps millennia. Even now, farmers in the Amazon, who are lucky enough to find Terra Preta plots, say the soil never dies. Crops grow better, harvests are stronger. The land quite literally remembers how to nourish. This secret of the soil may explain how massive populations, like those in Kuikugu, were sustained, not through imported grain, not through slash-and-burn agriculture, but through the creation of a living landscape, an ecosystem designed to feed, not exhaust. Think of it in a place where trees tower and light filters down in slanted beams, where rain pours unpredictably, and the ground seems hostile to roots. Ancient people created pockets of abundance. Earth turned into memory, soil turned into technology, and perhaps most remarkable of all, modern science has yet to fully replicate it. For all our tools, all our laboratories, all our fertilizers and chemistry, we still struggle to recreate what indigenous Amazonians perfected centuries ago. Our biochar isn't quite the same. Our composts don't last as long. We're still learning what they somehow knew, but how did they learn it? Was it observation, trial and error, a slow cultural inheritance passed through generations of soil tenders who understood not just planting, but nourishing? Or was it something more ritual, more spiritual, a sacred relationship with the land, where feeding the earth was part of feeding the soul? These are not idle questions, because Terra Preta is not just about fertility. It represents a worldview, a way of being with the land that contrasts sharply with how we often live today. Where we extract, they enriched; where we clear-cut, they coexisted; where we forget, they remembered how to feed not just themselves, but the ground itself. In this way, Terra Preta becomes more than soil, it becomes philosophy. It reminds us that civilization need not be defined by steel and stone, that permanence can be found in black earth, not granite walls, that sustainability isn't a modern invention, but an ancient inheritance we've only recently begun to unearth. And as we discover more patches of Terra Preta, we find they often correspond to the locations of hidden cities, not random scatterings, but grids, designs, settlements, farmlands, roads. Kuikugu was just one. Dozens more have been found across Brazil, Bolivia and Peru, and it's likely that hundreds, perhaps thousands, remain undiscovered, still wrapped in jungle, still rooted in dark earth. The deeper mystery, though, is this: if people once knew how to do this, why did we forget? Why did civilizations capable of enriching the soil for eternity disappear without leaving behind the method? Why has modern agriculture degraded so much land, while this ancient knowledge sits buried beneath trees? Perhaps the answer lies in the same place Terra Preta itself is found, between layers, between worlds, between myth and science, between utility and reverence, between what we can measure and what we can feel. Because when you hold a handful of this soil, it doesn't just look different, it smells different, it breathes differently, it feels alive, and in a way, it is. It holds the breath of generations, the touch of hands long gone, the ash of 1,000 fires, the bones of shared meals, the compost of memory. It is proof, quiet, humble, dark as night, that forgotten people once mastered the living world in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. In the next chapter, we move from earth to myth, from science to story, and follow the shimmering tale that has haunted explorers for centuries: a golden city, a lost kingdom, a memory passed down in the echo of jungle rivers. We follow the trail of El Dorado and ask whether myth was simply misunderstood memory. Long before LiDAR pierced the green canopy, long before archaeologists traced ancient roads across the Xingu, and long before dark earth whispered its secrets to science, there were other stories. Stories carried in the minds of desperate men, in the pages of half-true chronicles, and in the gasping last words of explorers, who searched for something they could never quite find, they called it El Dorado, the Golden One. To some, it was a man, a king, covered in gold dust, who bathed in sacred lakes and ruled over realms of unimaginable wealth. To others, it was a place, a lost city, glittering in the heart of the jungle, hidden from the unworthy, protected by forest spirits, or by the very plants and rivers themselves. A shimmering mirage, just over the next ridge, just beyond the next bend of the river, a dream you could never quite reach. And yet they tried. In the 16th and 17th centuries, dozens of expeditions launched into the Amazon, Spanish and Portuguese explorers, driven by hunger, greed and the lure of legend, cut through vines, battled insects, crossed poisoned waters, and died by the hundreds in search of this golden kingdom. Some never returned. Those who did often brought back strange reports, signs of roads, raised fields, cultivated land, villages, with hundreds of people, large, ordered communities, surrounded by gardens and rivers. But these reports were dismissed, called exaggeration, madness, fever dreams, because no great civilization could exist in the jungle. That was the belief of the time. And so El Dorado remained legend, a tale of failure, a warning, a parable of human arrogance, chasing myth into madness. But what if it wasn't madness? What if the explorers, for all their cruelty and errors, glimpsed something real? Not a city made of gold, but a network of cities, made of intention. Not temples paved in treasure, but ceremonial centers aligned to stars. Not wealth in coin, but in knowledge, of soil, of time, of water, of ritual. We often forget that myth is not born from nothing. It echoes, it distorts, it remembers in its own symbolic way. And what the legends of El Dorado may truly remember is not a palace dripping in metal, but a civilization that glowed with its own kind of brilliance, long before it was swallowed by green. Even the chroniclers of the early expeditions noted strange details: crops grown in regular rows, people living peacefully in large numbers, mounds and embankments stretching for miles. These were dismissed as anomalies, incompatible with the European belief that the Amazon was wild and its people savage. But now, centuries later, the LiDAR scans show what those chroniclers may have glimpsed: straight roads, circular plazas, gridded settlements, engineered land, and in their own way, these are treasures. El Dorado was not a lie, it was a misunderstanding. A golden city becomes far less mythical when you stop looking for gold, and perhaps that's the lesson the forest has been trying to teach all along, that value does not always shine, that wealth is not always metal, that civilization is not always built in stone. Sometimes, it is built in rhythm, in ritual, in harmony. The myth of El Dorado persisted because it pointed to something deeper than gold, a hunger for a forgotten place, a longing for a lost ideal, a civilization not ruled by conquest, but by balance, not designed to endure forever, but to belong. Now, as we uncover the real history beneath the jungle's canopy, we see that the truth was never far away, just misnamed, misunderstood, disbelieved. El Dorado was never a single city. It may have been many. It may have been Ku-Hikugu, or something older, something even now unnamed. And though the gold has long since vanished, melted, mythologized, or never real at all, the roads remain, the soil remains, the memory remains, buried, yes, but not lost. As we move deeper into this hidden world, we trade legend for layout, myth for measurement, but we carry with us the understanding that sometimes the two are not so different. We now walk upon the grid beneath the green, a pattern of cities, settlements, and sacred geometry woven into the forest, like embroidery on the skin of the earth. The Amazon is a place of tangled chaos, or so we've long believed. Trees rise wherever they please, vines drape without order, rivers twist and turn, like thoughts in a dream. But as we peel back the forest's veil, another picture emerges a picture of symmetry, of planning, of a grid beneath the green. LiDAR has done more than expose ruins. It has revealed patterns, patterns too deliberate to be nature, too aligned to be accidental. Across regions once considered empty, researchers have begun to trace the outlines of ancient infrastructure. Wide, straight roads stretch for kilometers, bisecting the jungle with mathematical precision. Mounds and ditches form perfect circles. Canals curve with graceful geometry. And at the heart of many of these formations lies something unmistakable: design. Let us walk this grid in our imagination. Beneath the trees of Acre, Brazil, lies an ancient ceremonial complex. It is not made of stone, but of earth. Raised banks forming immense geometric enclosures. Some are square, some circular. Some combine both shapes into mandala-like configurations. The banks are up to 3 meters tall and hundreds of meters across. From above, they resemble celestial diagrams, ancient blueprints carved into the land itself, and they are not alone. Further north, in the region surrounding Kuikugu, we find villages connected by straight roads, some over 10 kilometers long. The roads often terminate at central plazas, which form perfect circles or squares. These plazas are ringed by earthen mounds, where homes once stood, homes built from wood and palm, now long decomposed, but whose foundations still whisper from the earth. The precision is striking. Roads align with cardinal directions, plazas match the solar solstice points. Even waterways, engineered centuries ago, bend and curve as if guided by invisible rules. These were not ad hoc settlements. They were intentional spaces, ritual geographies, designed to reflect something larger than human needs. They were cities built not to dominate nature, but to resonate with it. This alignment, between ground and sky, between form and meaning, suggests a worldview unlike the one we inherited, a worldview in which architecture was not just shelter but symbol, in which planning a city meant understanding the cosmos, the seasons, the water, the soil. The city was not an island, it was a node in a living network. It mirrored the stars, it mirrored the spirit. Many of these sites follow a recognizable logic: a central plaza surrounded by residential mounds, all enclosed by circular ditches or palisades. Roads wide and straight radiate outward, connecting to neighboring villages. Some even lead to rivers, where canoes once traveled in quiet procession. To walk these roads now is to move through silence. The jungle is thick, the air still, but the layout remains, like the melody of a song long forgotten, yet somehow familiar when hummed again. In the past, scholars might have dismissed earthen constructions as primitive, temporary, low skill, unworthy of comparison to stone pyramids or marble temples. But here, in the heart of the rainforest, earth was not a limitation, it was a medium. The builders of these cities didn't seek immortality through monuments. They sought harmony with rain, with sky, with time. They built roads that breathed, plazas that echoed, gardens that fed not just the body but the land itself. And though their buildings have returned to soil, their shapes endure, not in ruins of grandeur, but in geometry, in proportions that speak across centuries. This perhaps is their most astonishing feat. They built impermanence with permanence. A circle of mounds may crumble, but the circle remains. A raised road may collapse, but its line remains in the canopy above. The grid beneath the green has not vanished, it has only softened, wrapped in root and leaf, but still intact, and the more we look, the more we find. In 2022, a LiDAR survey of southwestern Amazonia revealed over 400 newly identified earthworks, circular, rectangular, and complex polygonal enclosures, many previously invisible to both eye and satellite. Some researchers believe these enclosures were part of a network of ceremonial centers spread across thousands of kilometers, each connected like nodes in a web of sacred alignment. It is possible that what we're seeing is not isolated innovation, but a shared architectural language, a system of belief and design that spread across cultures and time. A blueprint not handed down from kings, but passed laterally, communally, from village to village, from skywatcher to skywatcher. Even the scale defies expectation. Some sites, like the one at Bella Vista, include fortified walls, moats, and multiple nested enclosures. This wasn't improvisation. This was legacy, an unfolding of generational vision, drawn not with ink, but with intention. And yet, for all its grandeur, there is no central pyramid, no royal tomb, no statue of a king. Instead, there is balance, and in that balance, a lesson: civilization does not require monuments to memory. Sometimes, it is memory itself, built into the land, aligned to the stars, and carried by those who remember how to walk its paths. As we wander this hidden grid, another truth unfolds: these cities were not walled off from one another. They were connected socially, spiritually, ecologically. Their roads were not just physical, but ceremonial. Their plazas were not just communal, but cosmological. And in this they mirror a different vision of what it means to live together, a vision not of hierarchy, but of harmony, not of vertical power, but of horizontal design. The Amazon cities may have lacked stone, but they did not lack sophistication. They may not have left monuments, but they left meaning. As we continue forward, we ask a gentle question: why then did we fail to see them? Why did a civilization so clearly present in the earth go unnoticed for so long? The answer lies not in the jungle itself, but in the materials it chose, because these cities were made of wood and earth, and the world only remembered stone. In the next chapter, we explore that very fragility, and what it means when an entire civilization builds in harmony with nature, only to be erased by the very nature it loved. We now enter a softer paradox. The cities that endured longest may have left the least behind. History, as we often tell it, is a story written in stone. Stone lasts. It resists the elements. It proclaims. It endures. Stone pyramids in Egypt. Stone temples in Greece. Stone palaces in Mesopotamia. Because they still stand, we still remember them. We build our histories around their outlines, assuming that permanence means importance. But in the Amazon, stone was never the choice. Not because it wasn't known, not because the people lacked ingenuity or skill, but because the forest offered different materials, lighter, warmer, breathing ones: wood, earth, thatch, clay, fiber. Materials in harmony with the climate, the soil, the culture. Materials that do not scream across time, but whisper, and that whisper, for centuries, went unheard. The great cities of the Amazon were built not to outlast the jungle, but to belong to it. Their structures rose from the land and returned to it with quiet grace. Their roads were packed earth, their homes were timber, their temples were woven and carved, not chiseled. And when the people were gone, nature did not rage against what they left behind. It simply reclaimed. Within a single generation, a plaza becomes a clearing, a wall becomes a ridge, a house becomes mulch. And the story fades, not because it ended, but because its pages were made of living things. Western archaeology, for much of its history, wasn't listening for these stories. It was trained to notice stone, to catalogue monuments, to weigh empires by the tonnage of their ruins. And so the Amazon, so rich, so organized, so deeply human, was categorized as empty, as wilderness. Because its cities didn't raise towers, they raised canopies. Because its maps weren't carved into rock, they were drawn into earth and water. But let us reconsider: is durability the only measure of greatness? Does a civilization need to leave a pyramid to be remembered? Or is there another kind of legacy, one made of alignment, of balance, of systems too soft to withstand the centuries, but not too soft to matter? In the Amazon, the builders of Kuhikugu and other cities shaped their world carefully. Their homes were clustered in rings, aligned with celestial patterns, their plazas opened to the east, greeting the morning sun. Their pathways flowed like tributaries, connecting communities across vast stretches of land. They used what the forest gave, and they returned what they did not need. This was not a failure of ambition, it was a choice. But our modern lens, biased toward hardness and scale, missed it. We mistook impermanence for primitiveness, and yet in recent years, a quiet shift has begun as LiDAR peels back the canopy, as satellite data reveals geometric fingerprints, and as indigenous oral traditions find echoes in archaeology. A new story is emerging. One that doesn't require stone, one that values systems over symbols, one that suggests that building in wood and earth may not mean weakness, it may mean wisdom. After all, what is more advanced, to build a city that resists nature, or one that flows with it? The absence of monumental stone doesn't mean these cities were unremarkable, it means their priorities were different. Their technologies adapted to their world. Their lives were shaped around resilience, not permanence. They lived in an ecosystem of cycles: birth, growth, decay, renewal. Their cities echoed that rhythm, and so they faded, not in collapse, but in quiet continuation. Even now, when archaeologists survey the land, they often find only the ghost of a city, a ring of trees growing differently, where a wall once stood, a strange patch of earth richer and darker than the surrounding soil, a raised platform, unnoticed, until viewed from above. These are not ruins in the classical sense, they are impressions like footprints in soft earth, left not to last forever, but long enough to be followed, and follow them, we must with gentleness, with humility, with the understanding that greatness wears many forms. A civilization does not vanish because it built in wood, it vanishes because we forget how to see it. In the next chapter, we turn to the moment when that forgetting began in earnest, when contact from the outside world brought not only curiosity, but disease, disruption, and devastating silence. We explore the fragile moment when thriving cities became abandoned forests, not by nature's hand, but by history's turning tide. We now step quietly into a chapter of loss, the curse of first contact. By the time European eyes looked toward the Amazon in the 1500s, the forest was already in mourning. The trees stood as they always had. The rivers still curled through the land, like veins through a living body, but beneath the canopy, something was missing. The roads were empty, the plazas were overgrown, the songs were softer, fewer, and many of the cities had gone quiet. It wasn't war that silenced them, it was contact, not the kind etched in tales of conquest, with swords and fire and banners flying, but the quieter, more insidious kind, the kind that rode invisible on the breath, that passed from hand to handshake, that entered through the lungs, and left in its wake, not just death, but disappearance. When Spanish and Portuguese explorers began venturing into the Amazon basin in the early 1500s, they brought with them more than hunger for gold. They brought disease, smallpox, measles, influenza, and other pathogens for which indigenous populations had no immunity. And in communities connected by rivers, roads, and trade, that disease spread like wind through dry leaves. What took Europe centuries to suffer through in waves of plagues, the Amazon experienced in decades. Up to 90% of the population is estimated to have vanished within a century of first contact. Entire generations lost, elders who carried oral histories, builders who knew how to tend the roads, farmers who enriched the dark soil, children who might have carried the language forward, gone. Not through battle, but through breath. The world changed so quickly that it left barely a trace. A village may have been full one season and empty the next, and in the Amazon, an empty village is not a ruin, it is an invitation for the forest to return, and it does, swiftly. Within years, roots weave through abandoned homes, canopies fill in over silent plazas. What once echoed with ritual and song becomes a grove of trees, indistinguishable from any other patch of jungle. To the eyes of explorers arriving later, in the 1600s, 1700s, the forest looked untouched, wild, pristine. They didn't see what had been there, they saw only what remained, and they mistook absence for never was. Even those early explorers who caught glimpses of something more: vast gardens, wide roads, communities with civic structure, were dismissed. Their accounts were labeled exaggeration, hallucination, fantasy, because by then the civilizations they had seen were already crumbling, already returning to the soil. And so the myth of the empty jungle was born. But it was never true. The jungle was not empty, it had simply grieved. Today, when archaeologists uncover the outlines of ancient Amazonian cities, they do so with a kind of reverence. They know that the places they find were never lost, only abandoned before their time. Not every civilization ends in collapse. Some are interrupted, and the Amazon was one of them. We must also understand, the disappearance of these civilizations didn't just remove people, it removed memory, the knowledge of how to maintain the roads, the rituals that gave rhythm to the seasons, the practices that sustained the dark earth, the stories of origin, of stars, of purpose. When a people vanish, it's not just the body that's lost, it's the language. And yet, not all was lost. In the quiet aftermath of collapse, some survived, some remembered, some carried forward the stories, the songs, the fragments of what had come before, hidden in myth, embedded in ritual, passed from grandparent to child, like seeds kept for better seasons. The forest too remembered. It kept the roads beneath its roots, it held the mounds beneath the moss, it preserved the outlines of a world that once thrived, waiting for light, for lidar, for listening. And now, centuries later, we're learning to listen again. But to truly understand what has endured, we must turn not just to the ground beneath our feet, but to the people who still walk it. The next chapter invites us into the stories that survived the silence, the voices that remember, the living descendants of the builders of the Amazon, who carry the embers of civilizations once thought extinct. We now follow the threads of memory, not ruin, to hear how the forest still speaks through the people who call it home. The Amazon's past is not only buried beneath the forest floor, it lives above it, carried in language, in ritual, in the quiet practices of those who still call the forest home. Because the people didn't vanish. Despite disease, colonization, and generations of erasure, some remained, and with them, fragments of a world once vibrant and vast. Among these communities, especially those like the Koikuro, descendants of the Xingu region's ancient city builders, history is not measured in books. It is felt, passed down in the cadence of stories told by firelight, in the curves of ceremonial dances, in the orientation of homes, and in the sacred geometry of memory. These are not myths in the modern sense. They are living histories, retellings of who came before and what they knew. Elders speak of great villages, once ringed by ditches, of roads that stretched into the horizon, of communal plazas, where the people gathered, not just to survive, but to celebrate. They speak of gods who walked among them, and of ancestors who understood the rhythms of the river and the stars. They speak of decline, but not always with sadness, often with reverence, as if the past was not lost, but gently placed in the forest's care. And now, as archaeologists uncover what lidar reveals, those stories are beginning to align with evidence: the circular mounds, the central plazas, the roadways, the canals, the sacred alignments. They all match what was said, even when those saying it were ignored for centuries. What was once dismissed as legend now begins to look like remembered architecture. This convergence between oral tradition and scientific discovery is not just validation, it's revelation. It shows us that history does not have to be written to be real. That story is not the enemy of fact, but often its shadow, carrying truth in softer shapes. But these truths are fragile. For many indigenous languages across the Amazon, the number of fluent speakers dwindles. With every elder lost, an entire library of unwritten knowledge, cosmology, medicine, agriculture, law, risks fading into silence. Yet there is resilience here. Some communities are reviving their tongues, reclaiming their stories, rebuilding the links between present and past. In villages nestled along the Xingu, children learn about the stars from grandparents who still remember the chants that map them. They walk along roads that feel ordinary, but were once causeways built by their ancestors. They step into plazas whose shape echoes the geometry of Koikuro, without ever needing to name it, because some memories do not need names. They need place, and the Amazon is full of place. There are stories of talking stones, boulders that hum with spirit, still seated in the same position for hundreds of years. There are trees believed to be planted by ancestors, marking sacred alignments or burial paths. There are rituals that mimic seasonal cycles, echoes of agricultural calendars, once used by people who designed their entire cities around the sky. Even music carries memory. Flutes carved from bird bones, used in ceremonies, produce tones thought to mimic the sounds of forest spirits. The very same instruments found buried beneath centuries of earth near ancient city sites. These are not coincidences, they are continuities, and they remind us that while the cities of the Amazon may have crumbled in form, they did not crumble in spirit. The forest remembers, in its shapes, in its patterns, in its people. It holds memory, the way soil holds seed, quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. And now, as scientists and storytellers begin to walk together, as maps are drawn not just from drones, but from dreams, a new chapter is opening. One where the past is not simply studied, but listened to, because no LiDAR scan can tell you what a road meant to the people who walked it. No excavation can unearth the emotion of a dance performed in a circle that mirrors the stars. No artifact, no matter how beautifully preserved, can replace the living pulse of memory. The forest, for all its silence, is not empty. It sings in syllables most of us have forgotten how to hear. But the song remains, and if we listen long enough, gently enough, we begin to understand that the Amazon's history isn't just buried, it's alive. In the next section, we pull back the lens once more, zooming out from memory to structure. We begin to see how the echoes of civilization are not isolated, but interconnected, drawn in sacred geometries across thousands of miles. We now trace the lines that link not just roads and rivers, but meaning. The next chapter is about design that speaks to the sky, and the sacred blueprint embedded in the land. The deeper we look into the ancient cities of the Amazon, the more we begin to see, not randomness, but rhythm. Not chaos, but coordination. Beneath the jungle's dense surface, a pattern emerges, a pattern of sacred geometry. These were not settlements, scattered at whim. They were measured, mapped, built, with invisible lines, stretching across both land and sky. A hidden lattice of intention that governed the placement of plazas, the orientation of roads, and the circular enclosures that appear again and again in LiDAR scans. In Acre, Brazil, hundreds of geoglyphs have been found, large geometric enclosures shaped in perfect circles, rectangles, and intersecting lines. Some are carved into raised earth, some into ditches. From the ground, they're nearly impossible to detect. But from the air, they form clear, repeating designs, like script in a forgotten language, written across the forest floor. Some of these shapes are simple, others are remarkably complex. Spirals, compound enclosures, radiating arms. The size and scale suggest communal labor, ceremonial function, and perhaps even cosmological purpose. And their precise symmetry implies something more than practical utility. It implies belief. This is not unique to one region, from the Upper Xingu to Bolivia, from Peru to western Brazil. These geometric patterns repeat, circles within squares, roads radiating out like sunbursts, sites aligned to solar solstices and equinoxes, their orientations matching celestial events, long before any telescope was ever pointed skyward. It suggests a shared system of understanding, not just of mathematics, but of meaning. In these cultures, geometry was not merely technical, it was spiritual. Shapes held power, circles represented the cyclical nature of life and seasons. Squares symbolized groundedness, the four corners of the world, the four directions, roads aligned not simply to reach places, but to honor alignments, to move with the cosmos. The central plazas of many Amazonian settlements are near-perfect circles, encircled by raised residential mounds or ceremonial platforms. The placement of homes may have followed status or function, but also cosmological principles. In some traditions, east-facing doors allowed the rising sun to enter at dawn, a daily rebirth, a symbolic blessing. Some researchers believe entire regions of the Amazon were connected through these sacred patterns, a network not only of trade or travel, but of shared myth and design. A belief system spread across rivers, spanning languages, yet united by form, a spiritual cartography that stretched across thousands of miles, invisible under trees until now, and yet, despite their complexity, no writings remain, no blueprints, no stone tablets inscribed with purpose. Only the patterns themselves, carved into earth, etched into memory, passed down in sacred rituals, still performed in some communities today. Could these geometries have also functioned as calendars? Could they have tracked the seasons, the flood cycles, the migrations of animals or fish? Perhaps, but perhaps even more, they mapped a relationship between people and planet, between ground and sky. This kind of architecture does not dominate the landscape, it listens to it, it integrates. It speaks softly in the language of proportion, a mathematics of reverence. It is a kind of architecture we have largely forgotten, one not meant to impress the eye, but to resonate with the soul. Compare this to the megalithic sites of Europe or Asia, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, Teotihuacan. There too we find sacred geometries aligned to stars. There too we see circles, solar corridors, lunar markers. Were the builders of the Amazon part of a parallel lineage, a separate flowering of sky-aligned design? Or did this reverence for pattern arise again and again, across continents, across millennia, as humans looked upward and inward, and chose shape as a form of prayer? We may never know for certain, but the echoes remain, and now that we have begun to see them, the forest seems to shimmer differently, not as a wall of green, but as a veil pulled back, revealing the outlines of sacred thought. Because the Amazon is not only rich in biodiversity, it is rich in geometry, the sacred kind, the ancient kind, the kind drawn with feet, firelight and faith. In the next chapter, we'll step back once again, not into shapes, but into storytelling itself. We'll explore how the narrative of the Amazon was rewritten by outsiders, and how the false idea of an untouched wilderness shaped centuries of erasure, because even sacred patterns can be ignored when we forget how to look. For most of modern history, the Amazon was described in a single word: wilderness. To European explorers, it was a hostile frontier. To cartographers, it was a green blankness, a margin of the map labeled unexplored. And to generations of scholars, it was too wet, too poor, too wild, for anything resembling civilization to ever take root. It was seen as the opposite of order, the opposite of architecture, the opposite of memory. But they were wrong, not because the jungle isn't powerful, not because it doesn't teem with life, but because civilization was never absent here. It was simply built differently. The myth of the untouched Amazon is one of the most enduring misconceptions in history. It began with colonial records, reinforced by flawed science, and eventually became cultural assumption, a false image of a virgin rainforest, sparsely populated, free from human influence. In this myth, indigenous peoples were painted as passive, living lightly, scattered across the landscape, disconnected from large-scale social or technological development. But that view is now crumbling, and in its place, something more beautiful and more true is emerging. We now know that the Amazon was actively managed by its inhabitants for thousands of years. Its seemingly chaotic ecology often bears the fingerprints of design. Certain trees, like the Brazil nut, the acai, the cacao, appear in unnaturally dense clusters around former settlement sites. Some scientists refer to parts of the forest not as natural ecosystems, but as cultural forests, shaped, nurtured, curated. The people of the Amazon weren't merely surviving, they were sculpting the land through methods like agroforestry, raised fields, and controlled burning. They created patchworks of productivity, food forests, medicinal groves, ceremonial clearings. Their hands touched every corner of the land, not to dominate it, but to live in rhythm with it, and that rhythm created cities. Not the kind of cities that built towers of stone, or left ruins of granite, but cities woven into the forest itself, organized, connected, aligned. Their very invisibility, for so long, was part of the forest's design. We were blinded not by their absence, but by our own expectations, because in the Western imagination, civilization has always been synonymous with monumentality, with writing, with kings, walls, and conquests carved into tablets. But what if civilization is not just what lasts, but what flows, what nourishes, what harmonizes? The people of the Amazon built in wood and earth, yes, but they also built systems of hydrology, soil engineering, calendar-based farming, and cosmic alignment, the very qualities we praise in so-called advanced civilizations elsewhere. They traded, they communicated across distances. They shared a cultural architecture that spanned regions. They created symbols, music, rituals. They built cities that adapted to the flood cycles, not resisted them. Cities that mirrored the stars, not defied them. What they didn't do was build empires, at least not in the traditional sense. There were no vast armies, no great conquering rulers. Power was likely distributed, fluid, rooted in ritual and memory. And so when collapse came, whether through disease or change, there were no stone tombs left to mark it, just earth, just forest. But within that forest, the imprint remains. In the next chapter, we turn toward the silence, the long academic forgetting that followed. We ask why these discoveries took so long to be believed, and why for so many generations, the Amazon was cast as the edge of the world instead of the center of a forgotten one. Because sometimes, civilization isn't missing, it's just been misunderstood. The Amazon was not lost. It was forgotten, and perhaps, more accurately, overlooked. This forgetting did not happen all at once. It happened, layer by layer, much like the rainforest itself, growing, covering, consuming, until the past disappeared beneath assumptions. The story of why the world forgot the Amazon's ancient civilizations is not a mystery of disappearance alone. It is a story about bias, about narrative control, and about the limits of the questions we chose to ask. When the first European explorers entered the Amazon basin, they often wrote home with reports of grand settlements. Some described wide roads and cultivated fields. Others spoke of populations so dense that villages stretched for days along the rivers, but few believed them. Those accounts were filed away, doubted, dismissed, labeled exaggerations from men disoriented by heat and illness. Why? Because the dominant narrative of the time required the Amazon to be wild. To the colonizing imagination, the jungle was a place to be tamed. Its people were seen not as heirs of complex societies, but as primitive, closer to nature than to culture. The idea of high civilization existing deep in the jungle clashed with colonial ideology. It was easier, and more useful, to view the Amazon as untouched, empty, ready to be claimed. This idea became entrenched, not just in politics, but in science. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, as anthropology and archaeology formalized in the West, the focus turned towards stone ruins and monumental architecture. Civilizations were measured by their buildings, their metallurgy, their writing systems. If you left no lasting stone, you left no lasting legacy, and the Amazon leaves little stone. So it was quietly excluded. Archaeologists searched for civilizations in the Andes, in Mesoamerica, in the Middle East. The jungle, vast, humid, uncooperative, was largely avoided. Those who did work there often struggled to keep up with the growth, the decay, the flooding. What they found was partial, fragmented, easily misread, and so the myth persisted, the myth of the virgin rainforest, of the sparsely populated, pre-agricultural Amazon, of a region untouched until modernity arrived. But the forest had been touched, it had been shaped, it had been home. The problem wasn't the absence of evidence, it was the absence of attention, and in that absence, time did its work. Cities became gardens, roads became root beds, plazas became ponds, and memory, overgrown with academic silence, receded into the shadows until something shifted. It didn't happen with one discovery, but many scattered findings that began to form a pattern: charcoal in the soil, pottery shards in unexpected places, unnatural mounds that refused to be dismissed as erosion. Then came satellite imagery, then came LiDAR, and suddenly, the pattern sharpened. A road appeared, a circle, a grid, and then a city. But even then, skepticism lingered, because the hardest myths to dismantle are not the ones we tell, but the ones we build around absence. The Amazon hadn't changed. It had always been what it was. But we were changing, learning to see differently, learning to ask better questions, questions that didn't assume stone, but allowed for soil, that didn't require empires, but welcomed networks, that didn't define civilization by what endures, but by what once flourished. This change in perception is still ongoing. Many textbooks still describe the Amazon as a frontier. Many maps still ignore its ancient roads. Many scholars still hesitate to use the word civilization, because remembering takes time, especially when the forgetting was deliberate. But it's happening. With every LiDAR scan, with every oral history recorded, with every reanalysis of a mound or soil layer, with every indigenous youth who learns their ancestral cosmology, not as legend, but as legacy. The jungle was never mute, it was misheard. And as we begin to hear it clearly, something beautiful unfolds, not just a re-evaluation of the Amazon, but of history itself. Because if we forgot an entire world here, what else might we have overlooked? What other places still whisper their stories beneath sand, beneath ice, beneath urban sprawl? What if history is not a straight line from past to present, but a web of paths, some clear, some covered, some still waiting to be walked? In the next chapter, we drift toward that waiting, to the places not yet uncovered, to the maps still unmade, and to the quiet promise that we have only just begun. Because the forest has more to show us, and we have more to remember. We often think of exploration as something behind us, a chapter closed. The maps are drawn, the continents known, the mysteries solved. But the Amazon quietly disagrees, because beneath its leafy surface, across more than 5 million square kilometers of rainforest, lies a world still unmapped. Despite decades of research and recent technological advances, less than 10% of the Amazon basin has been studied using modern archaeological tools like LiDAR. The rest, hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, remains untouched, not by time, but by inquiry. Imagine what sleeps there. Imagine what we have not yet seen. The Amazon, in many ways, is not a single forest, but a vast and layered library. Each tree a page, each mound a sentence, each buried road a chapter waiting to be read. But the text is still largely closed, its cover wrapped in green, its spine damp with centuries of rain and silence. And unlike books, the Amazon does not offer its stories easily. The logistics alone are daunting. Thick canopy, frequent storms, rugged terrain, and geopolitical boundaries make widespread surveys difficult. Political instability in some regions, along with limited funding, slows research even more. And because the jungle reclaims its secrets quickly, even discoveries risk fading again if not carefully preserved. Still, the momentum is building. Every few months, another site is found, another network of roads, another grid of mounds, a new geometric enclosure, a new clue. The once scattered dots are beginning to form lines, and the lines, maps. But those maps are not complete. They are whispers, outlines drawn in partial strokes, hinting at a grander picture just out of view. Some researchers believe that thousands of settlements may remain hidden beneath the forest, ranging from small ceremonial centers to massive urban hubs equal in complexity to any ancient city in the Old World. If true, this would rewrite not only Amazonian history, but human history. It would mean that large-scale, sustainable civilization arose independently in the rainforest, not just in deserts and river valleys, but in places long considered unfit for complexity. And more than that, it would suggest that we are not just discovering the past, we are rediscovering possibility. Because if a city can vanish under vines, and if that city can survive in soil, in story, in pattern, then what else might exist beneath our feet, beyond our view, outside our current imagination? Some believe the Amazon still holds entire civilizations lost, not in war or fire, but in silence. Others suggest that we've only scratched the surface, that the artifacts we've found so far are prologue, not conclusion. That Kuhikugu, with its circles and causeways, is not an exception, but a hint, a single stanza in a much longer poem. And then there are the deeper questions, the ones that science cannot yet answer. Were these societies in communication with one another? Did they share a single cosmological system, or many? Were their geometries mere practicality, or symbolic architecture reflecting a sacred order? And what of the spiritual significance of land itself, the way so many settlements align not just to stars, but to watersheds, to sunrise lines, to invisible currents of wind and ritual? The more we find, the less we're certain, and in that uncertainty, there is beauty. Because mystery is not the absence of knowledge, it is the invitation to seek. And the Amazon is full of invitations. Every newly found geoglyph challenges our definitions. Every preserved road, lined with trees that grow differently, raises questions about forgotten technologies. Every oral tradition, once thought to be metaphor, now demands to be read as encoded memory. And the greatest mystery of all may be this: what have we yet to unlearn? For centuries, we assumed that civilization meant conquest, that permanence meant stone, that progress meant growth at nature's expense. But the cities of the Amazon offer another model, one based not on domination, but integration, not on resistance to nature, but resonance with it. And if that model once existed, could it exist again? Perhaps that is the real discovery waiting beneath the forest floor, not just forgotten cities, but forgotten ways of being. In the final chapter of this journey, we'll return to where we began, to the quiet, to the stillness, to the soft echo that hums beneath all this green. We'll reflect on what it means to lose a civilization, and what it means to listen for its return. Because the Amazon is not a closed book, it is a slow unfolding, and the mystery yet to be mapped is still calling. And so we return, not to a ruin, not to a monument, not even to a single discovery, but to the softest thing of all, to memory. The Amazon is not a museum. It is a living place, still breathing with secrets, still pulsing with echoes of a world we almost lost, a world built with earth and intention, a world mapped in stars and soil, a world that for centuries we mistook for emptiness, because it spoke too softly for us to hear. But now we are learning to listen, beneath the green canopy, where light filters like ancient dreams, the outlines of a civilization shimmer once more, roads not walked for generations, plazas not danced in for centuries, circles traced in dirt, in air, in story, a geometry of belonging, a memory of balance, a whisper that says, we were here, and in many ways, still are. Because the people never truly vanished, the forest never truly erased, the story never truly ended, it was simply buried like a seed, waiting for warmth, for attention, for light. And now that we've begun to see it, we cannot unsee it. Not just roads and ruins, but rhythms. Not just settlements, but intentions. Not just history, but legacy. We often think of memory as something held in the mind, but perhaps it's also held in the land, in the curve of a river, in the fertility of dark earth, in the ritual of planting trees in sacred order, in the path a child takes through a clearing, unaware that their footsteps mirror those from 1,000 years before. Memory is not only what we recall, it is what we inherit, and the Amazon, for all its silence, has been holding that inheritance carefully, like a story passed from elder to child, through generations of leaf and wind. It does not shout, it hums. And now that hum is reaching us, from geoglyphs in Acre, from the dark soil of forgotten gardens, from roads that rise like ghosts beneath satellite eyes, from voices still alive in Jingu villages, who remember the old alignments, the sacred directions, the prayers once spoken at dawn. This is not the end of the story, it is its reawakening, and in this reawakening, we are offered something rare, a second chance, to see differently, to value differently, to remember that civilization is not always loud, not always stone, not always crowned in empire. Sometimes it is circular, sometimes it is green, sometimes it is built, not to last forever, but to belong completely, to be absorbed, to return, to become forest again, and that too is worthy of memory. So tonight, as we drift into rest, we hold this story softly, that deep in the Amazon, beneath the leaves, a world once thrived. It is gone, but not lost, it waits, and we are beginning to remember.